Chapter 7. The Dictionary Dodge. "This is Vicky, and I'm Gib," Gib said quickly. I could have kicked him. What on earth was he doing, giving Mr. Guy our names? Trying to get us both expelled? "So what are you doing here, then?" asked Mr. Guy again, picking up his killer dog. "Our mum is doing an evening class here, and we said we'd meet her," Gib replied. I held my breath as I watched Mr. Guy. I was going to keep well out of this one. The caretaker frowned and glanced at his watch, almost tipping Jaws out of his arms. "But evening classes don't finish for another hour, and a bit yet," he said. "Yeah, we know," Gib smiled. "Maybe you could tell us where we can find her. What classroom is the computing course in?" "Science block, room 24, Mr. Gib said. "Can you come with us?" Mr. Guy said. "Can you come with us?" Gib asked. I gasped. Then, quickly, trying to conceal it with a weak smile. "Have you lost your mind?" I thought, forcing myself not to glare at Gib. I looked up at Mr. Guy, trying to keep the panic off my face. "You must be blooming joking. Do I look like I've got nothing better to do than traipse around the school after you two?" frowned Mr. Guy. "Now, you know where you're going, so get a shift on." Gib grabbed me and pulled me along to the science block. "What on earth did you do that for?" I hissed. "Are you crazy? Suppose he did want to come with us?" "I knew he wouldn't." Gib shrugged calmly. "The only reason he'd want to come with us is if he thought we didn't want him to." I shook my head at Gib, impressed and yet horrified at his nerve. One of these days that mouth of yours isn't going to be quite so quick, and it's going to get you into a lot of trouble, I said. "Or it's going to be too quick, and it will be the same result," Gib said dryly. "The way you lie without batting an eyelid. How do you do it? Do you practice?" "You're being snotty again," Gib sniffed. "Besides, I don't usually tell lies unless it's for a good reason, and this is the best reason." "And what happens if Mr. Guy tells one of our teachers that we were here tonight?" I asked. "You worry too much," Gib shrugged. "We'll just say we were here to meet our mum, like we told Mr. Guy. It's no big deal." I still wasn't convinced. We entered the science block and walked up to the second floor to get to room 24. We peered through the glass panel in the door. A tall, skinny black woman wearing a dark blue trouser suit was the only one in the room. She was bustling around from table to table. "Here goes," Gib said, what I was thinking. I knocked on the door, and Gib and I walked into the classroom. The woman straightened up when she saw us. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Gib replied. I just smiled. Then there was silence. "I'm Rosa, the tutor," she said, when it was obvious we weren't about to carry on. "Can I help you?" "We come to this school during the day," I said, for wanting of something better to say. "Is that so?" I stammered. "Can we ask you a favour?" Gib said. He managed to sound both keen and desperate at the same time. "What's that then?" Rosa smiled encouragingly. "Well, we're doing a computing project together." Gib cast a thumb in my direction, not taking his eyes off of the tutor. "And it has to be in by Monday. And we haven't finished it yet. And this is our last chance. If we don't finish it today, we'll lose 30 marks from our final assessment for the year." I stared at Gib, absolutely amazed. I shouldn't have been surprised at all. I know. I'd seen him in action often enough. He didn't fib all the time, but when he was in trouble, he was very, very good at it. "So we were hoping that you'd let us use a PC at the back of the class, maybe, if no one else is using it," Gib finished. "But I'm teaching a class," Rosa frowned. "Oh, we won't make a sound, will we, Vicky?" "Not a sound," I agreed. "I don't know about this." "Oh, please," Gib pleaded. "We won't make any noise, honest, because otherwise we'll both be failing computing this year." Rosa scrutinised us both so carefully that my face began to grow hot. Could you tell someone was lying just by looking at their face? I began to think you could. "If you're both sure you'll not make any noise," Rosa began. "We won't," Gib said eagerly. "And you've got to leave when the class is over." "We will." "All right then," Rosa said reluctantly. "But mind, no noise now." We shook our heads. "You can use the table at the back with the 2 PCs on it." Rosa pointed to a table. Just then, a man in a blue pinstripe suit and a woman in a white dress came into the room. They directed curious glances at us before they sat down. Who wears a suit on a Saturday? I thought curiously. Come on then, Vicky, Gib whispered. We sat down at the indicated table. Get cracking before we found out, Gib hissed in my ear. Help then, I hissed back. Find out the name of the file that contains the dictionary for the spelling checker. That's important. Then make sure you can type it out. Why do I have to do that? I'll tell you in a minute. You'll have to tell me what to do, Gib replied. Impatiently, I rummaged through my pockets to find something to write on. I found a piece of clean, I think, but crumpled tissue and scribbled down the necessary commands. Gib gingerly picked up the tissue and laid it out flat before he started typing. I hope you haven't blown your nose on this, he said with disdain. I didn't bother to answer. I watched him type. Talk about ponderous. I started typing myself. Connecting up to the live systems was no problem. That was just a question of typing in the right data to Dad's Connect program, which was on the memory stick that I'd rescued from being taken by Eric. No, the problem would be logging onto an account on a live system when I didn't have a password. Still, I had an idea about how to do that, but I needed to write a command file to do it for me. It wouldn't work with me typing directly from the PC. The bank's network system would suspect something strange was going on and disconnect itself from the PC if I tried to do it at all manually rather than via the command file. As we typed, 2 more men entered the room. Curious, they smiled at us. I smiled back and then carried on typing, peering intently at the screen as I did so. I wanted to make sure I got my command file absolutely right. I'm ready, Gib said quietly after a few minutes. I looked at his screen. He'd searched through the hard disks on the server, which was set up for use by all of the PCs in the school, just as I'd written down. There were a number of error messages until he found the right file. On the rest of his screen, I saw show, help, dict, large, aardvark, aardvarks, aardwolf, aardwolves, abba, abik, abak, abacus. Why did you want me to check the dictionary? Gib whispered. I can't log on again using the test account because that's only on the development system. And as the bank disabled Dad's account on the live system, I'm going to have to use another account. Which one? Eric, the system manager's user account. It's the only account I can use where I know the privileges have been set up to do what I need to do on the bank's computer. But you don't know the password, Gib pointed out. This is the good bit, I said softly. I've written a command file to make sure we log on to the live machine at Universal. It enters system as the username and then pulls out a word from the dictionary you found to try that as password. If it doesn't work, the live computer will give out an error code, which my file will read, and then we'll try the whole thing again with the next word in the dictionary. And if my command file works, as it should, the bank's computer shouldn't lock me out after 3 false tries. Gib gave a low whistle. Whew, that's good. Will it work? In theory, but I've never tried anything like this before, I replied. And if Eric is anything like Dad and puts numbers in his password, then it won't work. But according to Dad, no one follows the bank's rules and makes up an unguessable password because they all reckon they'll never be able to remember them. Dad's always trying to get all of the bank staff to use passwords that aren't real words, but very few people at the bank, if any, actually do. So what do we do now? We sit back and wait and hope that the password doesn't begin with a Z, I explained. I pressed the enter key on my keyboard to start my file running. Immediately, the dictionary was shown on Gib's PC, and there the information began to scroll as each word was tried, just as I'd instructed in my command file. How long will it take if the password is right down at the other end of the alphabet? Gib asked. Ages. Longer than we've got tonight, so keep your fingers crossed. Gib's frown was a reflection of my own. Is that really the fastest way of doing it? He complained. Unless you already know a username and password on the live system, I stated. What happens if we haven't found the password, by the time the class finishes, Gibbs said. We've only got about an hour. Then we'll just have to hang around the school and sneak back after everyone else has gone, I said jauntily. I looked at Gib, my head held high, hoping he'd tell me I was nuts, and there was no way he was going to hang around until possibly midnight, waiting for a password that might not appear in the first place. All right then, Gibbs said at last. My heart sank to my ankles. I reckoned Mr. Guy was more than likely to make sure the classroom, this classroom in particular, was locked and shut once evening classes were over. After all, he didn't want anyone running off with the school's expensive computers. What shall we do now? Allow ourselves to be locked in the room? Then, how would we get out? Deciding to follow in Gibbs' footsteps, I decided we should wait to cross that bridge if and when we got to it. After all, we had every chance of getting a password that began with an A. Stop looking on the pessimistic side, I said to Gib. Rosa had started her class by this time. The room was about half full, and she was talking about the World Wide Web and how it worked. I knew all that already, but I saw that Gib was paying attention, whilst trying not to look like he was. Rosa whittled on, and the minutes ticked by slowly, until I was off daydreaming in a world of my own. Then a sharp jab in the ribs woke me up. What do you think you're playing at? I said. Shh! Gib looked around anxiously. A few of the people towards the back of the class turned around to look at us. Oops, sorry, I mouthed. I turned to glare at Gib. He nodded towards my PC screen. This system is for the exclusive use of Universal Bank personnel. Any unauthorised access to this account may lead to prosecution. I almost yelled out when I saw that. We were in. I double-checked this time to make sure I was on the live and not the development system. What's the last word to be read from your dictionary file? I asked Gib, leaning across to read his screen. Cabbage. Gib replied doubtfully. Cabbage? What a silly password. I smiled. But remember that, Gib. We may need it again. Without wasting any more time, I tried to find the directory that contained a batch library file. In the end, I did a global search over the whole system, and I still couldn't find it. Maybe there isn't one, Gibbs suggested, watching me closely. Well, I can't find it, I said, angry at myself. What else do we need? The transaction log file for the night the money was put into Dad's account, I answered. I don't need the whole lot, just the transactions over 900,000 and under £2 million. I can always extend it later if I need to. Go on then. This bit was easy. I'd seen Dad do this loads of times. What was Thursday's date? I asked. Gib considered. The 18th. System query. From transactions where date equals 18 May and AMT 900,000 and AMT 2 million. The data I wanted appeared almost immediately. Once I was happy it was what I wanted, I hit the escape key to stop the rest of the file being typed out. Then I typed the same command again, but this time I asked for the results to be printed. A message came up to tell me that the printout had started on printer 4. Our school had 5 high-speed printers kept in a small storage room next door to the classroom we were in. I knew I had to work fast. The chances of being discovered on the live system were even greater than being found on the development system, especially since I was using the system manager's user account. Hang on a minute, Gib frowned. That money was put into Dad's account in the early hours of yesterday morning. So yesterday was Friday, May the 19th, not the 18th. Why didn't you say that before I started printing the file out? I asked, annoyed. It was too late to stop the printout. I typed in the command again, this time specifying where date equals 19 May. I think I'll print out the files for the whole of this week, starting from Monday, I said thoughtfully. Why do you want to do that? Doesn't hurt to be thorough, and I might as well. We might find something interesting. But it's just more paper to wade through, Gib complained. Then I'll wade through it, I retorted. You don't have to. Keep your voice down. And I never said I wouldn't, Gib said. That will probably be a waste of time. It can't hurt though, I argued. I printed out a full transaction log from Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday as well, praying that I'd get the chance to finish all of this before the class came to a halt. My screen messages showed that my printouts had finished printing, just as Rosa was finishing off her lesson. Her class began to pack up and wander out. "I'll have to log off now," I whispered to Gib. "Did you do everything that you wanted to?" "Almost. I'll have to ask Dad about the batch library file on the live system. I don't understand why I couldn't find it," I replied. I logged off the bank system. Gib and I switched off our PCs and stood up. "Thank you very much," I said to Rosa as we made our way out of the classroom. "Yeah, thanks," Gib added. "Did you finish your homework?" Rosa asked. "Oh yes, we did," Gib said quickly. "Bye." He grabbed my arm and almost He grabbed my arm and almost pulled me out of the room. We stopped off in the storage room for our listings. Each listing ran to several pages. We gathered them up and scarpered. When we got home, I let Gib take the listings to his room. We took both the printout from the development system, which we'd done the previous night, and the new printouts from the live system. I let him. I wanted to read them, but I knew I was too tired to make any sense of them. I went to bed after cleaning my teeth and fell asleep immediately. "Mum, do you want help making lunch?" I offered after Sunday breakfast. It was the strangest breakfast we'd ever had in our house. No one had anything to say. Dad ate in virtual silence, smiling at me very occasionally, smiles that didn't quite make it to his eyes. And Gib didn't say much at all. "Do you want more bacon, Gib? Pass the orange juice, Vicky." But not a lot else. And as for Gib, he could hardly keep his eyes open. At one point, his head nodded so far forward, I thought that his nose would end up in his beans for sure. "We're not having lunch here today," Mum replied. "Beth and Sebastian have invited us all round to their house for lunch." "We're not going, are we?" I asked, dismayed. "Yes, we are," Mum said. "I think we could all stand a change of scenery. Couldn't we go some other time?" "No, we couldn't," Mum frowned. "Vicky, what's got into you this weekend?" "Nothing." I thought of Dad and the maths test and the envelope in my jacket pocket that I still hadn't given to Mum and Dad. Mum said. We set off for Aunt Beth and Sebastian's house at about 1 o'clock. Gib was just as reluctant to go as I was. We wanted to go through the listings, except he'd have more sense than to say it out loud. "Oh, I need to check something with you later," Gib said softly from next to me in the back of the car. "You two all right back there?" Dad asked. "Yeah, fine, Dad." "Yep, of course." "How are you feeling, dear?" Dad smiled at Mum. Mum didn't return the smile. "Tired," she said, looking straight ahead. Dad nodded. I looked out the window. We soon reached Aunt Beth's. She and Sebastian lived in a semi-detached house with 3 bedrooms, just a few miles away from us. "Hi, everyone," Aunt Beth said, smiling at the moment she opened the door. Come in. I'd almost given up on you." Every time I went into the house, I always noticed how quiet it was, and spotless. It was obvious they didn't have any children. Not a magazine, not a piece of paper, not a single book out of place. There was no dust or dirt or grime anywhere, and every 3 centimetre of space was filled with some plant. It was some kind of plant. It was like wading through a rainforest. Sebastian emerged from their sitting room, a smile on his face as well. He rounded up Gib to show him a model of some aeroplane he had just finished working on. We'd barely been in the house 10 minutes when Aunt Beth announced that lunch was ready. It was roast lamb kebabs, rice and salad, followed by strawberries and vanilla ice cream. One of the things I liked about Aunt Beth was that she could cook. Gib and I didn't say much throughout lunch. Mum and Dad and Sebastian and Aunt Beth whittled on about boring grown-up things. The price of food, the price of clothes, the price of houses, the price of everything. I kept waiting for them to ask Dad what had happened in court yesterday. I wanted to know that bit myself, but nothing doing. I think it was one of those not in front of the children jobs. Really annoying. They talked about the forthcoming baby for a while, which was a bit more interesting, but nothing I hadn't already heard before. "Babies are so expensive," Aunt Beth said. Sebastian and Beth didn't have any children of their own, so I wondered what they would know about it. "I know," Mum shrugged, "but David and I have wanted another child for a long while. I just wish being pregnant didn't make me so tired all the time. Have you got all the baby's things yet? Smiled Aunt Beth. Not yet. You don't want to wait. The prices of prams and babies' clothes and toys go up pretty regularly. It's a shame your salary at the bank doesn't go up as fast. Sebastian smiled at Aunt Beth. Aunt Beth smiled back, like there was no one else in the room with them. Sebastian reached out for Aunt Beth's hand. They were making goo-goo eyes at each other. Gib turned to me and pulled a face. I totally agreed. Ugh, how wet could you get? If we're in the way, just say so, and we'll leave, Dad teased. Sebastian laughed and let go of Aunt Beth's hand. Sorry. Don't forget, David, Aunt Beth grinned. Sebastian is my second husband. We haven't been married as long as you two old fossils. Fossil? I beg your pardon, Mum said, with mocking annoyance. Speak for yourself, Beth. You're older than me. Thanks for reminding me, Aunt Beth replied. The grown-ups were off. I faded out for a few minutes, like turning down the volume on a television set, until I heard Sebastian say, It'll get sorted, David. Just you wait and see. I can't exactly do anything else. Dad smiled slightly to take the sting out of his voice. I looked at Gib. I'd missed what had brought this conversation up in the first place. I'd ask Gib later. I can't help thinking that it'd probably be all sorted by now if they'd only run my weekend check-in programme, Dad sighed. But Nicola, the general manager, refuses to see past the nose on her face. What do you mean, David? Mum asked. I wanted to know that too. My check-in programme runs on both the development and the live system. It reads through all the relevant programme files on the development system and checks the transaction files on the live system for any strange anomalies. Dad began, but Nicola reckons that I put a time trap in my programme, and that's how the £1 million got into my bank account in the first place. So she's ordered that none of my programmes should be run until further notice. What's a time trap? I asked. They all looked at me, as if they'd forgotten Gib and I were at the table. It's a piece of code you write to only work on a certain day at a certain time, Dad replied, before turning back to Sebastian and Aunt Beth. Now I reckon that if she'd just let my check-in programmes run on both systems, there'd be a report on all the things on the systems that need further investigation. And in one of those reports might have been a pointer to the person who really put the money in my account. Do you remember, Beth, how I caught you out a few weeks ago? Beth laughed. I sure do. I had specified an end-of-month date incorrectly in one of my programmes. I had input a date for last year instead of this year, and the acceptance testers didn't spot the mistake. But my programme did, Dad said stonily. Aunt Beth nodded. Well, there's no point in going on about it, Dad sighed. If they didn't run it, they didn't run it. We'll just have to wait to prove my innocence another way. And it will, David. Your innocence will be proved, Mum smiled at Dad. It's a shame I'm on holiday for 2 weeks, David. Aunt Beth frowned. Otherwise, I'm sure I could get Nicola to run your programme. Mind you, as soon as I get back, I'll ask her. I've already asked Eric to make sure all the transaction logs and systems changes are copied onto the backup media while I'm away, so I can analyse them when I get back. It's very good of you, Beth, said Dad gratefully. Nonsense. And if I can help in any way? Sebastian left the rest unsaid. I glanced at Gib and coughed, nodding towards the door. Gib frowned at me and carried on eating. The dimwit didn't get the hint at all, but I reckoned I was onto something.